Well, hello and welcome everyone. It's really great to have you join us today for our episode on HCAI podcast, but really related to machine learning for user research. I'm PJ. I'm a UX designer. I'm usually behind the scene producing, but I'll be a host for today. So, as always, I just want to remind everyone that we'll hold the 15 minutes, of course, Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout, and we'll do our best to cover them as we go, and of course, as many as possible. So, not just because I am the host today, we have Laura, who usually co-hosts. She will be acting as our producer, and she will be addressing any questions that we have in the chat.
Thank you, PJ. And hi, everybody. I'm Yan. I'm your co-host along with PJ, and I'm also a user researcher on the show. I'll be addressing questions from PJ and later from the audience too. So if you have any questions, please ask. This episode is going to be about machine learning, and I'm going to refer to it as ML just because it's easier for the rest of the episode. So when you hear me say ML, I'm saying machine learning, and I'm going to be talking about machine learning specifically about how to assist with it with user research. And so we're going to actually be talking about some of the programming concepts, different kinds of models, and so forth that are involved with machine learning, but keeping it easy enough so that people who are user researchers or in the UX field like me, we could all follow along. And to prepare for this episode, I studied machine learning from the book 100-Page Machine Learning Book. That's what it's called, by Andriy Burkov, and it's available online for free. And so we will provide the link to the book to our interested audience members in the comments.
Awesome. That's super great. Yeah, we definitely need to share that. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about this with you today, Jan. But before we hop in the session, we always offer like a quick note about the mention of AI of our podcast. So, when we talk about AI, we're not just like focusing on generative AI like ChatGPT, but we'll be focusing on a broad range of AI applications, particularly like those we use in UX design and research. So, again, I'm super stoked to have you as my partner, as my host today, and the one I interviewed. So, like we do, we always go with rapid fire questions. And because you were part of, our first episode of this season, this is going to be super great for our audience to know more about you. So, we always start our interviews with a short rapid fire questionnaire so that we can really promote human-centered and human-first approaches. Before we really dive in, to of course, we're talking about your professional endeavors. So I want to thank Roy Opada Olende for creating these rapid fire questions via like his podcast. And his podcast is titled, if I remember quickly, I think it's Scaling Research.
Yeah.
Yes, Scaling Research. Perfect. So I'm going to ask you the first question. Where do you live?
Honolulu, Hawaii.
Okay. It's probably really hot there and it's not like Canada right now. Would you rather be able to speak or like to animals or maybe just like every human language in the world?
Speak to animals because I already speak so many languages that they all get mixed up. So
Oh, really?
Yes.
What languages do you speak again? I know you give me a few, but I just, can you tell me?
Russian, English, of course, and then I picked up Hindi when I was living in India, and then I speak conversational Spanish, but I learned having Laura as a co-host on our team that I don't speak nearly as much Spanish as I thought I did. So.
Okay, and do you want to learn French? Because I can teach you that.
That's on the list for sure. What a beautiful language.
Awesome. Cool. Do you prefer early mornings or late nights?
Late nights.
Okay. House with a view of the mountains or a view of the ocean?
Yeah, so actually I got into a long conversation with my wife on this subject, and we decided ocean is our preference. So.
Okay, well that's really important that you align on that.
Yes.
But in Canada, you can go to Vancouver and you kind of have the ocean and the mountain. So if you ever want to move to Canada, there's that. Oh, well, you have that in.
Oh, yeah, we have that in Honolulu as well. That's why it was like a tricky topic for me, because if I look to my left, I see mountains, and if I look to the right, I see the ocean.
Okay, well, I'm
So
gonna
it's,
stop asking. Okay, let's skip to the next question now because I'm kind of
yes.
jealous, to be honest. What about your last? And my last question, like, what's your favorite dessert? Like, if you had to choose.
Anything with dark chocolate. Like I have a huge sweet tooth and I love anything sweet, but if I think the best of both worlds is like a healthy sweet, and so dark chocolate I think covers that territory.
So just like a piece of chocolate, like it's just a piece of dark chocolate would satisfy
Anything with
you.
dark chocolate, I,
Anything.
yeah, dark chocolate cake, dark chocolate bars, like anything with dark chocolate, I'm gonna like
Okay.
it.
Okay. All right. So there's a l'amertume, we say in French. This is your first word you're gonna learn today. But there's like amertume. It means like it has like this little, yeah, because dark chocolate is pretty. It's not as sweet, so it has that sort of more of a bitter maybe taste.
Mm,
Hmm.
sounds
Okay.
awesome. I'm getting hungry.
Are you? Okay. Well, thanks for answering these questions. If you're ready, I'm gonna jump in right to like, some really questions more about yourself because these were rapid fire questions, but I'm really curious to know, if you could tell us a bit more about your background and experience, like user experience, like as a user
Yes.
experience. I think you were maybe a designer before, and then you
Yeah.
switched into user research leader, and then you had experience in hands-on UX contractor. Like, how did you start your career in user experience?
Well, you did a great job saying it right there, but I
Oh,
would add a little bit more. You
okay,
know me
please
too
do
well.
for your audience. Yes.
Yes. I had an out of the box kind of idea where I thought, what if instead of outsourcing business to India, what if I moved to India myself and launched a
Okay.
business there? And this happened in the last time that the economy was bad in like 2008, 9, 10.
Okay.
And so I moved to India during that time, and I first started by just getting a job with an Indian tech company as a business analyst. And during that time, I was like kind of like brainstorming how to start a business, and I launched a UX agency. And at the time, like I knew very little besides business analysis about UX, and so I learned UX by hiring um, very talented people who worked for me, and by managing them and leading that business for 7 years, I learned UX, and I was a true generalist at that point. Like I did UX
Hmm.
sales, UX hiring, UX design, research, like everything. Because like, and then when you're running a small company, you have to do everything that's under the sun. But then, like, what I realized after running a business for 7 years, even though it was a lot of fun, I realized that what I really liked most was user research. And so at that point, I left the business to my business partner, and I came back to the United States. I was also missing home.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I came
that
back to
makes
the
sense.
United States, and I started working as a contractor, which is what I've been doing for the last 6 years, mostly freelancing as a user researcher. And so I don't know. I feel like I really loved this kind of journey that I had because I got to experience everything in UX, but then also like
Hmm.
dive into what I really like, which was user research. And so um, it's been fun. The last couple of years, as the audience knows, I've been very into AI. I think that AI is a very exciting topic. It's
Hmm.
very nuanced with its ups and downs. It's got its pluses and minuses, but I think that it's here to stay. And so I've
Hmm.
really dove into trying to understand um, it, and that's how I hit upon machine learning for today's topic because I wanted to get deeper into this topic.
Right. So you're mentioning that, like, that was my other question I was going to ask you. Like, so what was the trigger, like, that made you really focus that you're more interested in AI? Like, I know you talked about it a little bit,
Yeah.
but like, was there like other, like, was it ChatGPT that came out? Was
Yes.
it something in the public? Like, why user research in AI? Like,
So
what was that trigger? Hmm.
So I was working so it was ChatGPT, but then I think for many of our audience, but then also at the same time I happened to be working on a software for a major bank, and one aspect of the software was a chatbot. Although we didn't really consider it like a chatbot at the time,
Okay.
but then because it seemed too complex to do. But then ChatGPT came out, and then we thought like, why not? Why don't we implement actually generative AI into this technology? And so I started using it as like a possible feature for this application. But then also, I thought when ChatGPT came out and I saw that like it runs on text and so much of our output as user researchers is text-based, I was like, there's no way that this is not going to transform the industry almost immediately. And so like I was like, if something is this transformative, like I think it is, I better learn it as quickly as possible. And so I really dove into it headfirst.
Okay, so that was it. Do you think it, was it successful? Do you think you did a good job just at the beginning of it? Like, how do you feel? I don't know.
I think there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And AI is basically propelling our industry. It's kind of creating this pressure that we like everyone that is in it. Like we have to learn faster and faster, which I think a lot of people in our audience will identify with, and that's I guess why people listen to us. One reason anyway. And so I think that basically it's just been a huge fire under me to get me to learn more about this topic, and it's led to me learning a whole bunch of other things like statistics in more depth, so that it's becoming like second nature because it's necessary for machine learning and data science, as well as obviously user research, and then learning ML for today's topic and so forth. And also like it's kind of like led me to understand how close some of these fields are to user research and how much like if you understand one of these areas, like how well it overlaps into user research and could make us potentially better user researchers.
Yeah, I'm super excited to know more about that because that's like kind of the core of our topic of today. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome. Cool. Yeah. Well, so I guess if I may say, from my understanding, that could we say that your work kind of like changed over that, like maybe the last year through the introduction of AI, like something that you feel like
it has to. It's been forced to, because there's just like the expectation of like how much workload I have to deliver in a certain amount of time has just like gone up and up, because like everyone knows now that AI exists, and so the expectations for us as user researchers, I think, or as UX professionals in general, I'm sure, has just increased with the advent of AI, and so I just try to like use it as much as possible to try to keep my attention on the really difficult things that the AI can't do.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you on that for sure. It's not a kept secret anymore. AI is out there. And, it's not like a superpower that we can use on the side and just like, oh, look at that. I'm so efficient. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into, the topic of today. Just for our audience, and maybe I'm just gonna add like, just pretty broad question, but I'm sure you're gonna get into this. But like, what is machine learning, and like why is it useful in user research? So you can, it's kind of two questions in one, but if you want, it's up to you.
Yeah. So machine learning is a field or a domain that's focused on creating algorithms that learn patterns from data to make predictions or decisions. And so an algorithm is nothing but like an equation, but just used for computer programming. And so if you've ever done things like equations in school, you're basically were studying algorithms back then. So many of us, like the audience listening, I think that you're actually know more about algorithms than you think you do, maybe. But the difference here is that when we're talking about learning patterns, like I mentioned, the machines are not learning in the human sense, but more like finding mathematical formulas that generalize well to unseen data. And so in user research, machine learning or ML is useful because of volume. So user researchers, particularly when we're working with quantitative data, we work with large data sets. Or if we're like in an existing project, like we have to do like synthesis of multiple different studies. That's a large data set. So ML is really good at that. Another thing that it's really good at is pattern recognition. And so it can identify trends or anomalies, and that's what the algorithms are for, right? That are hard to spot manually, like clustering users based off of behavior. And there's different ways to cluster, which we can talk about. And then there's automation as well. And that's where the AI comes in, right? So tasks like coding qualitative data, right, like tagging, right, or analyzing feedback can be used, it can be automated, sorry, by models like using techniques like natural language processing. That's often called NLP. So let me give you an example, right?
NLP, sorry, what was the acronym? Sorry, NLP? Is that what you mentioned?
NLP, and that's
Yeah.
known as natural. The full form of that is natural language processing.
Okay, perfect.
So let me give you an example so we can keep this a little
Please
practical.
do.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like,
love that.
like if you're running a usability test, say, or like a survey with hundreds of participants,
Mm-hmm.
or like a series of
Mm-hmm.
usability tests that you've run across like a product iteration cycle, right? Instead of like going and manually tagging all of the responses, you could use ML to classify feedback into themes, like usability issues or feature requests, or maybe things that the product did well, right? And then these could be used in an insight repository like Condens or Enjoy HQ. Dovetail is another famous one. And this could help
I was about to
synthesize.
say, like, it's reminding me of Dovetail that I've used in the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of these insight repositories already kind of try to automate this. And the way that they do
Mm-hmm.
that is with machine learning.
Okay. Well, so it's kind of like having like like when I said, I mentioned like um Dovetail, as a tool
Yes.
is like it's really great, save a lot of time. But like I was always curious, I don't know, maybe if you can answer this question, how does it know what's important in all the data that it actually collects or like kind of goes over, right, from all of these surveys? And do you know? Because it's kind of like a robot
Yes.
helper, right? So like how does this robot, let's just call it robot helper for now, but like how does it figure out what's important in all that data? Like
So it uses statistics, and so like it's important like if you're going to explore machine learning to at least understand like the basics of statistics, and so it uses statistics to aggregate data into different groups, right? At its
right?
most simple level, and so that's what's known as linear regression. So like if you try to break data into two different categories, you would use linear regression to say like, okay, this is true or this is false, right? Like so that's like one of the
Okay.
simplest kinds of machine learning problems. And then you split this data using a line, right? And then it goes into two different groups, and then like things in one group are, let's say, true, and in another group are false, or whatever, however you want to break up those categories. Um, Not so different from like what we think of zeros and ones with associated with machines, but obviously to like a modern level. And so that's like the simplest way that you could create an algorithm. And but of course, like with any kind of real world data, sometimes the data doesn't align to one group very strongly or another, and then it's like somewhere in the middle. And so that's where like we see these
Mm,
machine learning models sometimes make mistakes and so forth because there's a certain
hmm.
probability associated with statistics, right? And
Yeah,
so
because I was wondering, like, does it make mistakes? Like, how do you know
yes.
if the robot guesses are correct or not, right? Like, how is that determined? Do you know?
So
Like,
whenever we I think we've all at this point, anyone who's experimented with generative AI has seen a chatbot make a mistake at some point or another, and so
hmm.
that's how it happens. Is because there's the data is broken up into different sets or clusters, and then there's a certain probability of a response falling into one uh, cluster or another. With probability, there's always a chance that the chatbot gets something wrong. And so that's where the percentage chance of error comes in. But that's where also good machine learning comes in as well, because
Right.
like as machine learning engineers, as we like try to improve the models, it's going to reduce the chance of error more and more, and that's how we improve the models.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because even robots, maybe robot helpers are not perfect, but there's always better robot helpers, I guess.
Yes,
Cool. Well, I'm gonna jump into another question I have for you.
sure.
So we talked a little bit about how it works, what it is, what's ML, and everything like that. But so as you're a user researcher, so like if as we're speaking to our audience today, and all the user researchers that are amongst us right now, how can they like prepare their data for MLS analysis?
So preparing your data is kind of like doing prep work for like cooking in the kitchen.
Okay, I like that.
You need to you sometimes need to clean your vegetables or whatever it is that you're doing in the kitchen. You need to clean and organize the data. And so when I first learned this, I was like, oh, it's got to be something so archaic and new to me. But actually, like anyone who's worked with user research before has cleaned and organized data. And what machine learning engineers do is not so different from that. And so like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, there's a lot of overlap between these topics. Data scientists and machine learning engineers and user researchers, we all clean and organize our data before like we look into the research. So like to just be a little bit more specific, like what I mean by that, like removing incomplete or irrelevant responses. Like if you see like an outlier in the user data that's not adding anything useful to it, like this.
Sorry, you said an outlier?
An outlier, like in statistics, like we call it an outlier when something's outside the normal curve, several standard deviations apart from the normal curve, then that's an outlier. And sometimes those are like really interesting and they're good, but sometimes they're because the participant wasn't paying attention or they just made a mistake or something like that. And so that's how, I mean, deciding what's an outlier takes a little bit of experience and it's kind of an art. But the point is that like many of us who have looked at this kind of survey data or card sort data or tree testing data or any kind of quantitative analysis, we've had to identify outliers and decide whether to remove them or not. And so that's cleaning the data. And then the next thing is organizing the data into what machine learning engineers or data scientists call a feature. And a feature is just a piece of information about your data. For instance, let me give you some examples. So a feature might include a user's age or their location or the number of times they mentioned a particular product feature. Or like for text data, you can use tools to count how often a word appears in a response. If the word slow appears frequently, then like for tagging, right? Again, coming back to insight repositories, that might indicate that your users find the particular product speed problematic. And so these are different ways of like organizing the data into features. And then the next thing is to standardize the data. And so or standardize or normalize. And those mean different things, but just for the sake of today's conversation, standardizing is like more like statistics. And normalizing is just like setting the data within a particular range. But either way,
I can tell that you're a quantitative user research as well. You've got that experience in the the maths or whatever topic.
Yeah, we kind of necessary for this to be like, but you don't. It's not as difficult as you think for this kind of process. Like as long as you understand standardized standard deviation, then you're pretty much good. Like you don't need to go into like p-values and stuff like that for this. Like just like standard high school statistics is good enough.
Okay, well that's good to know because that's where it stopped for me anyways. So good to know. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Keep going.
No. So basically, once like you're at the normalizing or standardizing of the data, you're comparing numeric values. So you're comparing, let's say, session durations. And so like if you standardize them so that the values are on the same scale, that means that one metric doesn't disproportionately influence the results, and it also makes them easier to compare, which is why we standardize the data.
Okay. All right. So you standardize the data. We can learn. Is there any like particular? If I wanted to learn more about this, is anything that you would recommend? Because there's a lot, like I'm not really good in math. Well, I'm okay, but like if I wanted to learn more about that, is there anything that comes up to mind of an idea where you could recommend for me or for our audience?
Absolutely. So like if you want to learn, for instance, statistics, then there's this old but good book It's like the statistics Bible, I think. It's literally called Statistics. It's the fourth
Okay.
edition of Statistics. If you look around, you can again find this for free. And it's written by David Friedman, Robert Pisani, and Roger Purvis. David Friedman, I guess, is going to be one of the easier name among those to identify. But again, just look for a book that's called Statistics.
Okay. Our
And
title is Statistics. This is
yeah.
just plain statistics. Okay.
And of course, we will drop a link to the for the audience to the book.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that. I'd be kind of curious to learn more about that for sure.
Sure.
So I have a quick question related to about this data, right? So
Yeah.
if the data is not clean, like you say by the chef, properly,
Yes.
can the ML still work? Like, does it still?
I mean, so you want to do this as much as the time allows and the budget allows, just like any kind of user research project, right? Like you can spend more time and perfect it, and then you'll get better data and better recommendations and so forth. Often, if you put more time, invest more time into something, you'll get it to work better. And machine learning is no different, right? So like if you put more effort into cleaning the data, then the machine learning model will predict, will have more accurate predictions. And so that's why we want to clean the data.
Right. And do you have any tools or tricks to make this cleaning and organizing this data a little bit easier, especially for the people that are like just beginners maybe, or people that are new to this?
Right. So you want to look for anything that's unusual, like even if you don't know statistics, right? But if you're looking at user data without that, if you see something that's like abnormal in the user data, then that's something that you want to take a look at. That's just another way. That's outliers a fancy way of explaining
Right.
that.
Right. Because you were talking about outliners, and that's why I asked you the question, because I was like, wasn't sure what that was.
Outliers,
yes. How do we spell that? I keep hearing outliners. Anyways, outliers.
Outliers, like someone who
Okay.
lies.
Oh, like someone who lies. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I get it. Okay, I thought liners. I would excuse my French. I can actually say that. So, okay. So Okay, outliers. Right. Okay. So yeah, because we were talking about the features, and then you were talking about, it's basically like, if I understand well, like the features is just kind of like giving the robot helper. I'm going back to that, but it's kind of clues to make it better decisions, basically, right?
You're adding more nuance to the data, right? So like you have like let's say a row of data or like a long column of data, right? And so like that, let's say that row or that of data is wider, right? And you have more more columns associated with that row, then you're understanding that piece of data better, right? So like let's suppose you have you have a user, right, and you just know their age, right? That's not as informative as knowing their age, their occupation, their location, their interests, their pain points, what they do for a living,
It's
and
like
so
a
forth.
persona, like
Yes, exactly.
detailed.
That's a persona is a kind of feature.
Right. Cool. Okay, that makes sense now. Okay. Well,
Absolutely.
not that it didn't make sense before, but it's clarifying for me. So if you were about to, if I was gonna ask, we'll jump into my next question. So, like, what ML or machine learning models are like you'd say that are most practical for user research?
So the book that I read, again, that's the 100-page machine learning book that is linked in the comments.
By Burkov?
By Burkov.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
has several machine learning models. But here are two that are very easy for user researchers to pick up on. And one of them I already mentioned, logistic regression.
Right.
Some of these listeners who have taken calculus might think that this is related to regression, like in calculus. It's not that. It's just it just shares the same name. This is just simply putting data into two groups. Whether so one is like, let's say, true or false or yes or no. And so like for example, like in the user research context, you might be able to predict like whether users will continue to use your app based on their activity? Like, obviously, that's a very powerful question to create
It
a
is.
model. And so that's why like this is just like one really practical purpose and for how machine learning models could be used for by a product team. It's and so like the positive side of logistic regression, even though it's very simple, is it's also very simple to interpret. So you know exactly which factors like session length or frequency of use are driving the prediction. It's also like very easy to interpret the model. Like you can easily see like how the model reached that conclusion. And so like as that's the flip side is like as you get more complex models, like so some of our listeners may have heard of neural networks, which try to like duplicate human thinking, right, or mimic it anyway. Neural networks are harder to predict because they're more complex, and so you don't want to use a more complex machine learning model than you have to solve the problem.
But
So
like, how do you know when it's more complex or not? Like,
So like for that, you need experience. Just like with
okay.
user research, like some things come with experience. Like machine learning
Mm-hmm.
engineers get a sense of from experience of like, okay, this data set is very large and complex, so we probably want, and there's many different factors that we're trying to consider, and it's very difficult to break them into two camps. For example, like we know that the data falls into more than two camps, and there's lots of nuances. Then we want to use like let's say a neural network. Image data, for example, is another example.
Okay.
Like, let's suppose you have your user research project involves a whole bunch of images, right, that you want the machine learning model to understand. So that's when you would use something called what's called a convolutional neural network, or CNN. Um, and so
What is
that
that? Sorry,
a
what's
convolutional neural network. And so like that's like one of the more advanced kinds of neural networks, like or complex anyway. And it basically just identifies images. So when like back in the day, I think these are going out of fashion now, but the captchas where you identified an image,
mm-hmm.
computers used to be very bad at identifying images of what's going on in an image. But now, thanks to convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, now it becomes very easy for computers to identify what's going on in an image. And so that's why those you might have noticed those captchas going away.
When you say the captions is
Or
the
like it checks whether you're human or not. Like when you're like,
yeah, like is that even something that so you're saying like they're not doing it anymore because now anyone like computers
and
can do it
a
themselves, right?
modern machine learning algorithm can they're not doing it anymore because a modern machine learning algorithm can um, easily read an image.
Right.
So that's not a very good way to determine whether something that's accessing a software is human or not.
I'd
So
be really
now
curious.
yeah.
Yeah. So what are they gonna do now? What are we gonna be doing now?
Well,
Do you have any
like
thoughts
with
on that?
everything, like in this cybersecurity topic, like everything has like as technology advances, the ability for people to hack a technology becomes easier, but then also
Mm-hmm.
it becomes easier to defend against the cybersecurity attack. And so AI is being used for defense as well, to prevent like people hacking these captchas. But altogether, I think like these captchas have completely sidestepped this problem, and what they do is they just have you click now on like a checkbox, and that's it. Like you don't have to identify images anymore, and that's because they've gotten so good at identifying like what is a natural mouse movement, what does a real IP address look like, and so forth. That it just needs to be a click of the button.
Really?
Yeah.
So so I would say that the people like the sites that have the captions are just not they're not
Yeah,
following the game
they're,
right
they're
now.
not.
Yeah,
If you see something with images that's not it's using images to verify
yeah.
something is a human, that someone is a human, that's probably not the most up to date caption. It's better than not having one at all, of course, but
Mhm.
it's not the most advanced way to do that.
Okay. That's super I actually had no idea about that because I still do it like, I still see it sometimes, and I'm like, "Oh, here we go again," and there's so many memes about it,
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, like, I'll do it." I'll do it. I'll get it done. I'll get it
Yeah,
done.
it's,
So,
it's when just clicking a button is much easier from a user experience
of
standpoint, and
course.
verifying whether someone is human or not, like
Yeah.
cybersecurity standpoint. It's just better all around.
Yeah, I was always curious about that, and it's related to accessibility. I don't know. There was this thing that I was like, okay, we're doing this because we're doing this, and I guess it's safe, but to make it safer. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of happy just for me to just be able to click now. It could be nice
Yes,
going back to how it was before, or just a
yes,
click of a button. But at the same time, yeah, I could see why it existed, and I could understand also why now it's maybe not the best option, for a website. So,
yeah.
cool.
So I mentioned logistic regression as one
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
So
yeah. Please.
and let me give you another one. So like if you want, let's suppose like the data is a little bit more complex than just two
Hmm.
groups, then you can
Okay.
use clustering models. And so clustering models group users into categories based off of their behavior. And so then you can have more than one cluster. So if you want, so you see how users navigate your website clustering into this, say, groups like browsers, shoppers, or us like researchers. Like then you could group it into those kinds of groups. Maybe an admins could be like a fourth group. And so that way you can tailor your design and communication to each group's needs, forming personas. You can have more accurate um, predictions because you're taking into account more nuance, and it's actually
Hmm.
once again reflecting actual user research data that we might encounter like on a user research project.
Right. So, but like with clustering, like, is it possible for the group to overlap? Like, it can, like, for example, can someone be like both a browser and a shopper, for example? Can you kind of use that
Yes, you could
example?
you could do that, but the goal is to separate these into as distinct groups as possible. And so, like for example, one technique to do that is known as k-means clustering. So you might have like one cluster, another cluster, and another cluster, and each cluster is just basically like different groups of data points, right? And so within like let's say one cluster, you might have like one data point in the middle, and then like some points that are closer or further away from that point in the middle. And so that's what forms that cluster. And then you'll have like several of these different clusters that relate to
Hmm.
these different kinds of groupings, and that's how by measuring the distance between these different data points, that's how k-means clustering happens.
Okay. So if you're kind of visualizing it, it could be
Yes,
like these two hands are a cluster. Like I got my two hands up in the air right now, and there's just kind of
yes.
it's
In
spread
your case,
out.
it's a
But
full cluster.
I'm actually moving my hands together. But it could be that some of my fingers are interlapsing in some ways, if
Yes, and
that's
so like the,
correct.
the goal of the model is to separate your hands as much as possible, so that it,
Hmm.
it becomes more distinct. Like, and then and also make it clear that your face is a different cluster altogether,
Right.
and,
Okay. Let's
and
make
and
my
then and
faces
then that's how it
different.
makes an accurate prediction.
Okay. Great. Well, that was okay. That's okay. I can kind of see being Italian and everything and just get my hands out there. I need to kind of share. But yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're kind of like three clusters in there. Okay, and they can overlap. So
Yeah.
and okay. So for that, and then the logic regression is more like making predictions.
Yes.
But like, how do you know like which factors matter the most? Like, if you were going that direction, like with that model, like how do you know which?
I think like that. So that's where you need to look at other user research data. Like it's probably better to not look at it like in isolation. Like at least that would be my approach as a user researcher. So like if I'm looking at a set of quantitative data, like I personally prefer to use qualitative data with quantitative data to help me understand
For sure.
quantitative data. And so like
Hmm.
conducting user interviews to understand the quantitative data is really useful. So like for instance, like I like to see what could be patterns in a broader uh, like user group, and then like if I think that something is like a statistically significant pattern, which is where those p-values come in. P-values help you determine whether something is a matter of chance or statistically significant. Like it's highly unlikely that something is a matter of chance. Then once you've established that, then you want to know, like, okay, why is this pattern happening? And the patterns can't really tell you that. Like, that's where you need qualitative user research to actually talk to your users to understand, like, why something is happening.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot of terminology like nomenclature and like jargon. Um, it's a bit new for me. I'm still like quite learning about
Yes.
these models right now, and some of our audience as well, I'm sure.
Yes.
Um, so like if I wanted to use one of these models, where should I start? Like how
Well,
do I
I
start?
think that the best thing is to pick up that book that I mentioned,
Okay.
100-page machine learning book. It's a little dry and it's a little hard to understand. Like, at least that I thought so. And so I actually used ChatGPT to help me understand the book. Like, whenever I got stuck, I would go
Okay.
back to ChatGPT and I would upload a copy of the book, and I would be like, hey, I'm in this section and I'm not really understanding this. Can you explain it to me in terms that I can understand? And then, like, if I couldn't understand its explanation, which also sometimes happened, then I would ask it more questions until I understood it, and then I just go back, reread the section again, make sure that I understood it that time, and then keep reading. Like, even though it's just a 100-page book, like, it took me like a month of like reading, putting a lot of effort into it, to
Okay.
understand it. Like, it's not an easy read, but most things in life that are hard are worth it.
Okay, so you're telling me that I should start reading this book. It might be
Yes, I'm
difficult.
a big
I
fan.
might have to go and check with ChatGPT maybe as a helper just to maybe translate it to me or like kind of make it to kind of explain to me if I was a 5-year-old or the classic of like, hey, okay. So that was kind of okay. Well, maybe
Maybe some
when
of
I
our audience won't even need the help of ChatGPT to understand it, but that was just
yeah. Well, yeah, and then French is my first language, so I'm gonna speak for myself, so for sure, sometimes it is a bit more difficult, the English terms and things like that.
yeah.
So, but yeah, okay. Well, I might you maybe you could ship it from Honolulu to Canada if you don't need it anymore.
All
You know
online.
it
It's
by
completely free.
as a gift
The,
for the
the book is
holidays.
the book is completely free, so you can like
Oh
if
yeah,
you
you were saying that. Yeah, I can just get it online. You're gonna share the link anyways. Okay. Well,
right.
maybe I'll just like instead of using ChatGPT, I'll give you a ring, and then maybe we can go through it together and check some stuff and just explain
Sounds
to me.
good.
So awesome, awesome. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, I'm just looking at the time right now, and we're about we have about 15 minutes left. I do have one last question, related to what we're our topic today. So if you know bringing it back to a familiar question for the, the people that are actually conducting user research, like what are the ethical, because we're talking about machine learning and using all that, but like what are the ethical challenges like that you would say in
Yeah.
applying ML to user research, because that is a big hot topic, and it'd be something that I'm actually very
So
curious to
once
know because
again,
I'm kind of attached to it. Yeah.
anyone who's worked with user research will find this
Hmm.
the answer to this familiar, because like the same considerations, or almost the same considerations, that a user researcher needs to think about in terms of ethical user research,
Hmm.
will be come up when applying ML to user research, and that means like basically things like bias in data. So like if your data is not representative of your user base, then the ML model will reflect those biases, and so that's not good. User privacy, like anonymizing personal information, is something that comes up in user research all the time, and you'll want to do
Hmm.
that if you're working with ML models for sure. And then transparency, that's something that's specific to ML models. Like I mentioned, like neural networks, for instance, complex models like neural networks, or like ChatGPT, are black boxes. They will make predictions, but they won't show you how you're making that prediction. And so, like,
Yeah, I was curious about that.
yeah,
They
so
will.
that's why, like, I emphasized earlier in today's episode,
Mhm.
that we use simpler interpretable models when we can. Like, another example that we didn't go over yet is like a decision tree. Like when and I could
Sorry, can you please
a
repeat that?
decision tree is another example of like an easier, simpler model that's often used in like conversational design for like creating a chat bot.
Mm,
So like these kinds of models are often better because then you can explain the results to stakeholders and it's not going to be a black box.
okay. Right. So if the bias sneaks into the data, like, can you fix it later, or is it like, how does?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
iterate. Like and so in ML is a lot about like um, iterating on your data and improving the model. The thing is though that like like iterating costs time and money, and so like you want to it obviously like pays to try to take care of this as early as possible and not wait for it to become a problem.
Okay. I said I had a one last question, but actually, I do have another one. If that's okay.
Yeah,
And it's just there's so much. Actually, I have so many questions, but I just want for our audience, I just kind of want to because we're like we're gonna jump into the Q&A. We do have a question that is coming up, but I just had
yeah.
one last one before we jump in. Um, if for our audience, can you just maybe share a practical use case where like ML actually enhanced your work, like in user
Yeah,
research?
yeah. So,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so,
Okay,
yeah. So, like,
awesome, please.
yeah. So, like, if you're looking, like, let's say, in my case, a card sort, right? Like, if you look at a card
Mm-hmm.
sort and you have like this card sort data, one way that you can look at your card sort data is just to like tabulate it and look at the numbers and then and try to estimate it using statistics. But an easier approach, like using scikit-learn, which is like an ML toolbox, a toolkit. You can just call some functions from scikit-learn, and you can
Psychic learn is what's
scikit,
uh
scikit, scikit-learn,
psychic. Okay, yeah.
kit, like not kit, not that's kick.
No, no, a kit, K
Yeah,
E T, K
yes,
I T. Yes, thank you.
yes, yeah. So scikit-learn is a great one, and I think that's the most commonly used toolkit. And so if you just use that on your data set, it just makes the problem solving process much easier. There's also like a lot of commonly used tools that do this like too, so that you don't necessarily have to use ML. Like if you are an optimal workshop user, for example,
Hmm.
you can upload your card sort data, or
Yeah.
you can actually run your card sort with Optimal Workshop, and then it will do all this sorts of analysis for you. Like K clustering is something that we brought up in today's um, discussion, and K clustering is something that the Optimal Workshop does. They call it 3D grouping, but like now, like and when I first looked at it, I didn't understand what it was, but now I know that it's K clustering, and so a lot of our modern user research tools use ML already. Like I mentioned already, Insight repositories try to do automatic tagging, and they probably do that through machine learning.
Okay. So machine learning, it'll always know like if it's, or maybe it'll define if it's a positive or a negative. Like
Yes.
if a comment is a positive and negative, like is it looking at specific words or like I was just always curious to know like is that's how it
Um,
works in some way?
so it depends on the kind of model that you're looking at. It could break it up into a series of data points,
Hmm.
like for the linear regression, which is I think what we're talking about here. Linear
Hmm.
regression breaks it up into an x-axis and a y-axis, and so it just looks at two different variables and it plots data points, like how far or low each data point is, and then it breaks them up into groups, right? Like,
Hmm.
if it's possible to break them up into two groups, then you would use linear regression to understand
Right.
um, that.
So that's like the true or false kind of what you were referring to
Yes,
earlier.
yes.
Right. Right. So, right. Um, yeah. So I guess that would be like something to look into,
Right.
definitely for user research. And like, it's always kind of Yeah, I'm always fascinated of how it works, right? Because there's just like, does it work in different languages? Like, if the comment is like mixed, like I love design, but it's too slow. Like, like how does it handle like a mix, like positive and negative, especially when for that is it linear regression? Is that
Yeah.
the word? Yeah.
So
Like how does it handle that, right? Like it's like I like it, but I don't. I'm mixed. I'm not sure. Like
So
is that
when it has more than two groups, that's when we use the
the
clustering
cluster
models. Yeah.
clustering muscle? Okay. Yeah, so that's okay. So that's starting to clarify that. So when there's more than two, we're doing clustering. If it's just two, like
That's
black and white,
clustering is one method, but it's a common, it's simple method. Again, we can
right,
like easily explain to our stakeholders.
right,
Um,
okay, all right. Well, yeah. Sorry, I'm taking a bit of time. I'm like pausing, and I'm just like trying to process all of this information.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot
absolutely.
here we've talked today, but I am curious to know if a question from our audience, and maybe we can bring this up. If Laura wants to bring it up, or we can have it here. So I think I can find it. So I think one was re- it's coming in from, if I'm not mistaken,
Ah,
you have it right here. Yeah, Hashita Shad. Dev, I'm so sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly, your name, but we do have a question. It's asked, do user feedback on generative AI platform help improvise the error?
um,
Um,
so it's hard to tell. It depends on the model that's being used, and usually generative AI uses multiple models at the same time. Like if it's something like Chat GPT or Gemini, like they'll be using multiple different models in combination, and
okay.
so user feedback probably helps, but the question is to what degree and how much they're going to prioritize that, because there's other kinds of feedback that's incorporated into the response at multiple different levels, and some of it is professional, not just from the users, but like the companies often hire human trainers to help improve the models, and so that's another layer of feedback that's goes into the what's known as the fine tuning process. Um, and so, yeah, it does help. I think that each company will determine how much they want to use that feedback.
Right, because I do remember like when I use ChatGPT, sometimes it just generates it like choose your answer, like which one
Right.
is actually the one that's answering the question that you're asking, and I'm like, okay, now I have to choose, and like I'm always questioning, does that make it so that it's actually pulling that as a feedback, and is that generating
I think
feeding?
they're probably taking it with a grain of salt, because like
Come on,
they're
more
not
important.
because they don't really, there's no way for them to really know like the expertise of this user, and they might be asking a question
Mm,
most likely because they don't know themselves. They're probably not testing the Chat GPT, right? They're probably for the most part, I'm guessing they're probably asking because they don't know themselves. And so if they're asking a question of Chat GPT and then they're asked which answer they like better, if I was a user researcher working for OpenAI, I would be dubious about the nature of this user feedback, because like why is this user feedback being used in this way? I would use user
mm.
feedback in a different way. Like I would use user feedback to understand the ease of use of the model, and whether
More of UX kind of design,
yeah,
or just more
I
of the interface,
yeah, I
or
definitely would be expecting our users, in the case of these chatbot models, to be experts on all different topics that they might have questions on. And I also would like to see the data that shows that this does not hamper the user experience, because I'm also dubious about that. I think that there's better ways to get feedback on the performance of your model than
mm.
going back to your customers and asking them, unincentivized, by the way, to provide feedback.
Yeah, well, I wonder if they put us in a certain category and what information like they have on us. So, okay, these are the user testers of Canada and Gatineau over there, and then we've got and they like I don't know.
Unpaid user testers. Unpaid user testers. These are just
I,
user
I
testers that
I I
get paid.
know it's true, but there is
Yeah.
like when we use apps, like either surveys, marketing does it all the time. Like how likely Adobe, how likely would you recommend? Like there's surveys, but at the same time, I guess it's more of a questionnaire, I guess. But yeah,
Even
I guess.
that's a good example. But even in that example, like
Hmm.
you don't if you're using ChatGPT, you don't have a choice. You have to pick one.
That's true. That's
It
true.
does not allow
Yeah.
you to proceed with the conversation until you pick which answer you like more. So
That's, you know what? That's actually not. Are you sure about that? Because I
I don't
think
know. Or they hide it so well that I don't see an
you always
alternative.
click one or the other. Okay, but that's
Yeah,
become
I
a
always
dark
pick
pattern
the other.
now. And
So
like, we're
it's
not
just
gonna.
like
Yeah.
like in product testing, which is what this is known out as outside of of the AI community, is usually like really simple. Like you ask a user a very simple question, like true or false. Do you like this or do you not like this kind of feature? And like and done well, it like takes like about half a second of the user's time. Whereas this kind of product testing, particularly if you're looking for like complex information, there's going to be like a one long drawn out answer from ChatGPT and another long drawn out answer from ChatGPT. And then you have to read all of that, and you're kind of forced to do it. And so I think that that's not the best kind of
You
user.
know, you're bringing an interesting point. Like, I wonder if people are more lenient to say, "Oh yeah, because it's AI, I guess I'm just gonna do it." I don't know. It's really interesting. Thank you so much, Rashista, for your question. But yeah, I was just it's a bit out of subject. I was playing a video game about
Hmm.
AI and Android, and there's actually within the video game, one part when we logged in after playing maybe a few sessions, we actually had it was kind of like an AI figure and it's part of the interface, and she would actually ask a survey about AI and how would we feel comfortable is related to cyborgs, and it would be comfortable having a cyber work like being part of our daily life. And there was this whole survey in the video game. It's the first time I saw that, and I was like, I wonder, like, are they collecting the data? Are they doing, is that user research for a video game that is actually being integrated?
I don't think it's done being well. Not to be critical of this unknown video game, but I like to see user research have some kind of controls. There should be
Mm.
randomized. There should be screeners. Just asking users randomly questions unexpectedly.
It was a survey, but you kind of was
Yeah,
tempted to answer because you were kind of involved in this AI environment. Anyways, it's maybe a topic for another
yeah,
subject
definitely.
on a podcast for
I would
sure,
love to.
because we've got a few more minutes left just before the end of the episode. So I think we're good to wrap it up, Jan, if that's cool with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was super great for you sharing these insights with us today and to our audience. Like, we appreciate you tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, we'd be really grateful, of course, if you could share it, with any of your colleagues, your friends, or anyone that might also enjoy this conversation, as well as any of our other podcast episodes that we have. Right, we've done a few. This is end of or a year and a half now, so we've
Yeah.
done a lot this year as well. So, but I did want to do put a like a special attention for because we it's an important note. I just kind of want to let our audience know that we'll be taking a podcast break for the first 3 months of 2025. Um, as we're planning a new improved content in April, we have some projects on the go related to that. So, however, we will still be offering UX and AI content, like I'm so sorry, via posts and links. And that will be all shared on our LinkedIn feed. So please be sure to follow us on our LinkedIn page for that new content. What else would I want to say? Yeah, that's just wanted to give you a little parenthèse about that because it's important. So if you're not going to see us in the next 3 months doing podcasts, we're still working on podcasts and other HCI projects. So yeah, and yeah, of course, always your thoughts and feedbacks are super valuable for us. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any ideas and how can we can improve. We always like to improve. And Laura, myself, and of course, Yan. I'm just gonna throw you there as our guest speaker. We will always love to hear from you. So, this being our last episode of 2024, I guess I could just end it up saying, we really wish you a fantastic rest of your week,
Happy
and of course
holidays.
of the year. Happy holidays. Yeah, and we're super stoked and excited to see you in 2025.
Thank you for
So
listening.
yeah, thanks for being with us. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you. Bye.